Okay, so GROWLANSER 5 was a game that was released. It was technically, it was completely redone. It was technically the real first 3D GROWLANSER game, and it kind of had stuff that was a little bit different, but it was still a GROWLANSER game nonetheless. And it was a fully length game. It was the prequel to 6, and what happened was in GROWLANSER 5, essentially what had happened was the Japanese version was a bit different compared to the English version. However, it was still accessible, and you could still play it from start to finish, which is actually really cool. So, what's really cool about it is that the way the controls are a little bit different. You know, there's actually like this module program you can use that's in the Japanese version, but I still think it relies heavily on the controller that you're using. But at the same time, though, it's like in the Japanese version, you can still, like, it's just a little bit more complex in the Japanese version. I mean, you don't necessarily have to have accessories. It's still like a controller you can use and beat it, so it's not like you have to have, like take for example, like on the Super Nintendo where like you had like the Super Scope or to play like certain games. Like you could still beat this game, like, you know, buying the disc, and that was it. You didn't have to buy anything else with it. But it's actually programmed a little bit differently compared to, like, as far as like the way the AI is set up, and the AI is actually really useful in GROWLANSER. It's actually pretty cool. You can change stuff. In the English version, from what I understand, you can change stuff. You have more customization in the English just to kind of make it easier, but like more shortcuts and all that. So I'd imagine the Japanese version came out first, so it's like a 1.0 version, and then later on it was like a 1.1 version as time went on. But again, I'm sure you can still probably do these things in the Japanese version, but it's just a little bit more complex in the Japanese version compared to the English one. But it's still the same game though. But again, English and Japanese. And again, you know, the game is in English, as I said, so you don't have to worry about that being in Japanese only. So that's good. And so what it's pretty much about is, you know, there's like this war that breaks out, you know, go figure, right?
A survivor.
And so they're trying to figure out like how to stop it, and over time it's kind of like a combination of like dark arts are involved, where like, you know, there's like all these other rituals going on, but at the same time though it's because again, that's one of the main elements of GROWLANSER is that, you know, you see a lot of you're going to see like a lot of people up to no good, and then like eventually once you get involved you find out, oh hey, there's actually something big going on here. So that's pretty cool. And so what's really interesting about GROWLANSER is like it's not just about, you know, humanity and all that. It's about like uncovering secrets from like other worlds and all that. And again, that's kind of what GROWLANSER is well for. GROWLANSER is supposed to be the savior of light, to save their world from a dying, you know, starvation and all that. Pretty cool concept. Still, you know, never really gets old. Kind of like in Fire Emblem, how like the Fire Emblem actually is like a mysterious emblem that, you know, has mysterious powers, and, you know, like in the first games it was able to open up any treasure chest, any locked door, which was really cool. So what's also really cool is in GROWLANSER 5 there's what is known as like, they kind of revamped like the tree system, so like you could actually have more customizations with the way like your characters get like their skills. Kind of like what you were already used to, but it's like a lot bigger now. Like there's even more customizations and dichotomous keys you can use. It's really cool actually. Some people say they didn't like 5, but 5 was actually, like, it had a really good concept, and honestly I was impressed by it when I first played it. Well, when I saw videos of it as well, you know, I still had to beat 5 from start to finish, but it's because I've been playing too many other games at the time, but now that I'm really like obsessed with GROWLANSER again and, you know, still going back into it, there's a lot of other things to talk about that not too many people really know about it. It's more or less it's kind of like going back and forth with you know, just trying to figure out like what's going on, how to take care of it, all the secrets, and you kind of like want to explore the land, you know, like that's what it comes down to, is knowing where everything's at. GROWLANSER 5 also resumes the idea that, you know, you can go to like other places and like level grind and all that, and like it's like the higher levels you get, the less EXP you'll get in the end from like certain enemies, because again it depends on your level and depends on their level, you know, so it's kind of like that. There's like it wouldn't be the first JRPG that's done that before, but, you know, but it's kind of one of them though that, you know, to prevent like, it implies more patience rather, you know. You have to like really take advantage of like, it doesn't decrease how much money you get though, so you can always go buy the best equipment after you've accumulated so much wealth over time, which helps out tremendously, by the way. But GROWLANSER is probably like one of the harder real-time strategy games because like every battle's different, and again, you know, depending on where you're at and how it goes down, it like really makes it easy or hard depending on the situation that you're faced with. And I also want to add, if you've never played a GROWLANSER game, again, start with, I want to say in the series now, even though it's kind of debatable, like, I mean, if you're just playing it as a whole, maybe start with GROWLANSER 4 because it seems to take place like many years before like all the other ones do, even though it's on its own different continent. But at the same time though, you might want to start with 1 through 3 because that seems to be like GROWLANSER 4 is pretty much the first game in the entire trilogy that pretty much talks about how many years ago there was like this dark matter energy that was just flying around beyond time and space. And again, this is known as Vesper in this case, reincarnated. And so, you know, it'd be like 1,000 years before GROWLANSER 3 takes place in a different realm, and then you would have the sequels, another 1,000 years would pass, so then 2,000 years total, and then you would have GROWLANSER 1 and 2 take place immediately after each other, and then somewhere between, you know, in its own way, but 5 and 6 are their own direct clones, you know, but again, I don't know how much time passes between those games, and I don't know how much time, like, we're at, but it's like, but every GROWLANSER game, from what we understand, takes place in the same world. You know, it's just different intervals of time, and they're essentially like faced with the same problem. You know, their star was dying, or their planet, so they had to transform it. But it seems to take place in the same world because there's what is known as Grotians and Featherians, which are essentially the angels. The Grotians are essentially humans, and if there's like any mystical creatures beyond that, they would essentially be like from beyond that time period. So basically, from what I understand, you know, the original race was the Gavs. So Gavius was the original ruler, you could essentially say, they say he was the king, the original founder. Kind of think of it like Game of Thrones, where like, you know, the White Walker king is coming back for his land. That's essentially what it's about. And you know, he was the original king, like the very first king that ruled over that entire land. And it's kind of like how Gavis was, you know, the world, you know, got lost in time. Eventually, you know, the world still existed, but it was just a dying world, so everybody moved from that planet to another one. But then once Gavis caught wind of this and eventually figured out, like, the people who he was originally ruling over, you know, had migrated somewhere else, and they are actually living somewhere else, you know, now Gavis wanted to take over that because, you know, that's what it originally was the king, the ruler, and then eventually they killed Gavis after it severely weakened itself over time because it divided it. They found its weakness and somehow managed to kill it as well. So that was really cool. So they got rid of him. And so as of right now, it seems like, and as far as GROWLANSER goes, as well as the trilogy, it seems like, as well as 5, it seems like the biggest threats really were only the people that were from, like, they could space time travel and all that, as well as it's always the mystical, like the mystical forces, the ones that are like deities essentially. Maybe not the Featherians, even though they're like low, like I said, they're like low tier gods. They're still mortals technically, but they can still, like, they have like magic and superior, like, supernatural powers. But the Grotians, while they're humans and mortals, they also have, thanks to Groshu and all that, and Grotians essentially were mystical mana. You know, they had it like embedded in them. Like, for example, like in the first game, Louise, for example, is her name, I believe. It's said to be Carmaine's sister. However, though, once you find out that Carmaine was really not he wasn't really created. You know, he was actually created by Gavis, or Gavel, sorry. Because the Gavs all had the same abilities. Pretty much the low tier, like the very, very lowest tier, like Goober ranking of the Gavs was the Yuns, Yung, and over time they all looked the same. They all evolved differently, but they all looked the same. Man, hell, even Gavel looked the same as Gavis. If you actually play enough of it. I'll be honest, I even got confused between Gavel and Gavius when I first played the game because it seemed like they literally looked like they were the same characters, but they're not. They're different characters. So Gavel and Gavis are, so wherever Gavis came from, whoever Gavis was, you know, whatever creatures are like that, you know, kind of like going back to like Tales of Vesperia, the Entelecheas and all that. Kind of makes you wonder though. You know, Gavus was a different story. However though, what other mystical powers that are far greater than the Featherians and the Grotians, you know, what other mystical powers threaten the worlds, the original worlds, and even the worlds of GROWLANSER as a whole, you know, what powers threaten those people? You know, it's really interesting to think about. The Grotians and the Featherians don't really get along very well. They secluded themselves into another form of reality. So again, like they live in like heaven and all that, but it's really just another dimension. But it's like what's really interesting though is they still have their problems and they still can be threatened. I mean, like once Gavus found his way back, I mean, you know, even the Featherians were like they didn't want anything to do with it because it's kind of a mistranslation, sort of like they did, or a misunderstanding. They did sort of create Gavel, like, you know, they took something that already existed and built it up in its own way. But like they didn't originally create it. It was thanks to Gavus that they essentially had this power, but Gavus wasn't really on their side. Gavus ruled. Gavus wanted nothing to do with anybody except he wanted them to serve him. He didn't want to give them anything in return except for terror and hell and pitiful nonsense sorrow. But it's like in the end, but you know, he was the one that you know got his ass kicked after. So it's a really interesting series. You really got to play GROWLANSER a lot to really understand this. But again, you know, kind of going back to 5, it's like continuing threats from like
what now?
You know, the original world, or from like somewhere beyond that time. That really makes you wonder. You know, like it came from space and then it came to this planet, and you know, once they figured out, like, you know, aside from like other people trying to betray each other in that time period, eventually, like that's what GROWLANSER 5 essentially turned into.
You're right.
Trying to stop like paranormal activities and all that, and all these other parallel universe threats.
We're too close to the ocean, which means we're in.
And it really developed into, again, you got like the multiple endings. Everybody's got their own abilities and stuff like that. The ring weapons return and all that, which are really cool. So again, it really comes down to like, you know, how you play the game. You know, there's so many different ways to play the games, and you really just have to, again, if you've played the other 4 GROWLANSER games, you're gonna probably not really be shocked with this one. You know, you're gonna see a lot of familiar things. There's a lot of characters in this game too. I think there's like 15 of them, if I remember correctly. Somewhere around there. It's a big GROWLANSER game, and you know, for a game that some people said they didn't like, I would say that that's not entirely true. You know, it's kind of like, you know, kind of like what Star Ocean 5 was faced with. I mean, it was still a game that people put effort into, but maybe it just didn't sell well and people thought it sucked. But that doesn't mean that, you know, again, that doesn't mean that a game, you know, it's judging the game individually. It's based on what the game consists of. And again, if you like GROWLANSER, yeah, I mean, hell, you know, there's a lot of GROWLANSER elements in these games, so you'll like this. I mean, I have yet to even play 6 all the way through, which is the last GROWLANSER game, sadly. But, you know, again, it's the direct sequel to 6. But from what I understand, 6 is, it's called Precarious Wars, I believe. I used to think it was Precarious World. I always thought it was Precious World. But, again, I could be wrong. I'll have to look it up again. Precarious Worlds, I believe, is what it is. And it's pretty much like a dive. I think pretty much essentially what it's about is it talks about, you know, the history of the game itself. It really divulges into, kind of takes, it's another 3D GROWLANSER game, but essentially it divulges into like the original worlds and the history more of like what had happened over the years, mystical threats, and you know, it just seems like energy is infinite and everything's made of energy, life goes on, and there's really nothing you can do about it, you know.
I think it looks cursed.
You know, it just, you know, like the Big Lebowski, cursed. You know what that is, you know, what did he say? He's like, life goes on, man. You know, that's true. You know, that is very true.
This continent is
life
just
goes
a huge
on.
prison.
You know, even in the world of GROWLANSER, if they ever make a 7th game, like in the main series,
on the other side of that
it's gonna be, it probably would take the same place as it being like a 3D sort of GROWLANSER game. But as far as 5 goes, you know, it's called Hetergy of War, I believe. It's also worth noting that the game itself,
just what are
in Japanese, it's called GROWLANSER Generations, but it's funny because when GROWLANSER 2 and 3 were sold, they sold it as a bundle as a deluxe version in North America and I believe Europe, and it was called GROWLANSER Generations as well, GROWLANSER 2 and 3.
Maybe we could save
However, it's worth noting that GROWLANSER 1 and 2 actually probably would have made more sense to bundle with, because GROWLANSER 1 and 2 at the time were... Well, actually, I should have just released all 3 of them. But, yeah, you know, that's just it, though. There's a lot to the series, and there's a lot more to it than you could imagine, so you can go from there and try to figure that out. But essentially the idea is that as time goes on, GROWLANSER 1, 2, and 3, and 4, they all take place in the same world, but at the same time, though, they take place at different times and different times in space as well. So, like, again, different, maybe the same planet, but, like, at the same time, a different time period, different place on that planet. And so we're faced with, you know, just trying to figure out history, you know, figure out, like, where everything's at and how to save the world as well as the people within the amount of time that is to do it. So I would recommend, because in English it's called GROWLANSER 5. Again, I use the Roman numeral Heritage of War, and it's still a fun game. I mean, I could see myself playing this game multiple times if I really liked it. Because, I mean, you know, it's GROWLANSER. You know, it makes you want to explore, makes you want to see what's out there. And then you get ambushed by something, and it's like, okay, you know, how are we going to work this one out, you know? That's what makes a really good RPG. Especially a real-time strategy one. That will get you thinking. So again, comment, rate, subscribe, favorite, share. If you need help finding this game, let me know. I'll help you find it, and we'll figure it out from there.